Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a Doctor Who episode commentary podcast where I, Toby Hadoke, have to choose the best things about a story nominated by a friend of mine and see if I can guess if our opinions tally.
Hello, Toby. Hello, everyone. I'm Jon Turner, and I am an artist and illustrator based in Manchester. The story that I've chosen for you this week is one that's very dear to my heart. It is Battlefield.
'Tis the witching hour. Battlefield, Part 4. Press play. Then I'd go back, but it's pointless because there seems to be a different gap every time. Now, this is a challenge, everybody, more than usual. I've been quite enjoying Battlefield. Odd, I hated it when I was younger. I think there's a lesson there. The distance. You see in the present when Battlefield was on, Doctor Who was hanging by a thread. Anything that happened could potentially spell the end of the show that I loved and my lifeline. It was what I held on to negotiate my difficult teenage years so that I could emerge from them and become an adult when everything became sorted. Ha ha ha! And now it's midnight, I can't sleep, I'm in lockdown. Looks like we're going to have another 6 months of lockdown. I'm largely unemployable. Interesting, I've had a very interesting few days having a back and forth with a director I hugely admire, nothing to do with Doctor Who, and texting my son and feeling like part of something, but it's not going to lead to any work. It's not actually about any of the stuff I do, that I consider my living. But I do sort of think, but at least, I can say, I know that person, or I've had done a thing. It's just like I'm accruing an increasingly poor currency for what I look back on my life and it'll just be a series of encounters and anecdotes. And that's not entirely unrelated to this, because this is Nicholas Courtney's last appearance in Doctor Who, and the Brigadier was very much my favourite character and favourite companion. So I was always delighted when he came back, and I did encounter him at conventions and at commentaries, and ended up living not far from him. In fact, when I went to his funeral, the post-funeral hospitality was done at Nick's favourite Chinese restaurant, which was literally 3 minutes from where I lived. I'd had a chance to go for drinks with him a few times in Crouch End, but I was working a lot and commuting from Manchester to London and doing all of those things. And you think now, would I have given up a gig for a evening in a pub with the Brig? There he is. Try me. See, we have to forget. This is what this story does very well, and I don't like it, but it's probably right that I shouldn't like it, is that the Brigadier is steeped in blood. He is a convenience for the Doctor. I've done Day of the Daleks for this, and I really don't like the bit where the Doctor kills the Ogrons. But of course the Brigadier comes and machine guns the one that the Doctor doesn't kill. And as somebody of slightly peacenicky liberal morality, I do understand the sort of hypocrisy of going, yes, the Doctor shouldn't take a life. He's got these guys, though, who can kill whoever they like because the adventure requires lots of the bad guys to get killed, as long as the Doctor doesn't get his hands dirty. And that is a paradox at the core of the show, or at the core of the liberal reading of the show, which is why I'm always quite interested when conservative commentators talk about Doctor Who, because they've equally got a point. It's interesting. Good explosion here, good stunt there. Yeah. Actually, the fight scenes aren't bad here at all, and I do like the sword fighting amidst the the military khaki and traditional sort of gun battles. I'm getting fed up of hearing about your mother. Glorious. It's interesting because obviously this is steeped in Arthurian legend, and I'd sort of seen, I'd read bits about the Round Table. We used to go on holiday to Cornwall, and I'd seen Excalibur. But obviously, I think that's great. That's such a casually included effect, deployed effect. It's an effect that just. I'm talking about the crystal ball that Morgaine sort of dismisses and flies away. And what's quite nice is having these villains from sort of folklore, is that relatively simple things like a chalk circle is really powerful against them in the way that a helicopter or whatever isn't. And I quite like that sort of ancient simplicity sometimes wins out over modern technology. The Destroyer! I love the Destroyer. What a terrific mask. Marek Anton, who of course, and my friend at school, Anton Collins, was very pleased with the fact that Marek Anton, there's an actor called Marek Anton, who is of course also in The Curse of Fenrik. He plays Vershinin, one of the Russian soldiers named after characters from Chekhov. And he's quite a handsome boy, but he's great. And there's real character to the Destroyer, and that mask is so good. I like the blue, I like the hair. So, yes, and Jean Marsh, I've had the pleasure of interviewing her as well. She was good fun. But yes, I sometimes, when doing these, as I say, I was sort of texting this very, very famous film director this week because of something I don't really consider part of my job. And it was exciting, but it was... I think because I was brought up in the countryside in the middle of nowhere, as I watched this, in the middle of nowhere, the idea that any person could be a conduit to the sort of starlight, I'm afraid I think that is a contender for the... I'm sorry, Doctor, for the worst delivered line of any Doctor. Yeah, that's okay. There's plenty to love about Sylvester McCoy, but that line isn't one of them. But yes, as I say, being in the country, as I think we all do, we watch this. To me, is a conduit to starlight. That all these people were living the life, and the world that they inhabited, which seemed so far away from mine, seemed like a magical one where it was all anecdotes and being a motley crew and being creative, and that must be the life. And it was the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But and that's why I think when Doctor Who lets us down or whatever, we get rather furious. But as I've got older, I realise there is no pot of gold, and the rainbow keeps reforming further in the distance, and that one is a fool to think one will ever spend that currency, and one should. And I think I've already chosen my best bit from this episode, because there's a philosophy within it, which in this night where I cannot sleep and I'm unemployed and all of these things, it's what we keep coming back to. And look, he's a small part actor. I don't think he's had a line this episode. That's the only time we see his face. He's now an internationally successful film director, because you keep going. You do the best you can. And I was actually saving this one up to do when I think I was a bit more, because some of these stories, somebody will suggest them and I'll just dive in, and I think I should actually have a think about them so that I can place in my head some things I know that I can sort of pepper through so that they will be interesting. But what you've done is you're at my house and we've woken up in the middle of the night. Neither of us can sleep. I've made some Horlicks. It's metaphorical Horlicks because it's tea, but Horlicks just seems more appropriate. And we're sitting on the sofa and I'm bending your ear. You've probably got a bottle of wine. I can't have one, so I'll forgive myself for dribbling on in. I'm a vision in Canary, by the way, for those of you that aren't doing the YouTube version of this, but are doing the podcast. I have canary kerchief on. She's so... I love it. I do feel sorry for Xiao Yung, but interesting. There's been a survey today about saying that actually BAME performers are on screen to a higher percentage than they're represented in the makeup of the country, but actually are represented much lower in behind the scenes and executive levels. And I think that's fine. I think you have to reset the balance, and if it means we are currently getting more representation, it is about time. And I speak as somebody that's occasionally lost a part because they've looked at the, and this has been told to me a couple of times, the makeup of the cast and realised that it's all a bit the same, and so they've. So of course they never recast the lead. They always get rid of something. Johnny No Bollocks a bit further down the credits. And if that is something that means that we have a more progressive and reflective and can encourage people from those sectors that might not feel encouraged into the arts, that is an important thing. So when we look back in 20 years and things have sort of, I knew they hadn't killed him. It was too anticlimactic a way to kill him here, because of course we were worried that this was that's a great stunt, the last we were going to see of the brig, but that wouldn't be his death scene. But I was in tenterhooks for the whole of this. But and I think the reason I'm not obsessed, but it's worth talking about, is that I've listened to a few podcasts recently where, people have said, in The Bodyguard, the Jed Mercurio series, there was a Chinese bomb disposal expert, and one of the senior police officers was a black woman, and it took me out of the drama. Well, why did it take you out of the drama? It didn't. I'm not Mr. As I say, I'm not Mr. I'm sometimes quite cynical about, certainly in comedy, where you see somebody who's been going 5 minutes get a job that veterans of 20 years of great skill and experience don't get near, and it's not always to do with comedic skills. So I can be cynical about it, but when somebody's just sort of when a part, as I say, a bomb disposal expert, or in 1917 a Sikh soldier, the worst Sikh soldiers, not that many, but it doesn't matter. It's bizarre. I'm not, as I say, I'm not Mr. Woolly Liberal, but it's never taken me out of a drama. I've never thought, why is that person black? I think that's a really peculiar thing. And if it is peculiar to people, if it is not the norm, then the reason it is being done is so that in 20 years it is the norm, and we all wonder what we were so preoccupied and obsessed about. I think it's a bit of a hobby horse with me with this one, because I think I've tied myself in knots trying to say the right thing, which is also a part of the problem with the discourse, is that you get a bit mealy-mouthed because you can get attacked from both sides, and that doesn't help discourse either. I love the bit where the destroyer breaks open his chains, although he does tear some of his own chest hair, which is gonna smart. I do like the relationship with Morgaine and her son. You sort of believe they have a life outside the drama. Ace is one of the bravest companions. It's all the companions, but the gung ho nature of Ace is very, very likable. And that it's sort of matched by the performer, because she's a gutsy performer. I like her outfit too. Is that a conveniently placed bit of corrugated? Oh, is this? It does that brilliant bit, doesn't he? Where he goes, "Is that a spaceship?" I sometimes do that in everyday life if I'm trying to distract somebody. It's never worked, but it amuses me. It's usually a futile effort. I love that. I was so terrified that the Brigadier was going to die. I've just remembered. My friend from school came to watch this with me. I would get girls back. And we were going to watch Doctor Who. My friend from school, Catherine, came and watched this episode at my house in Shropshire. I had totally forgotten about that. And I think I was harbouring the idea of doing a remake. Every time there's a Doctor Who episode on, I wanted to make my own version of it as a film, and I'd type up the scripts. I never actually finished it. And she would have played Morgaine because she's very good at striking women parts. Many years later, I ended up marrying her. Ha! Ha! Not married anymore, but still a nice story. And how funny that has just occurred to me. It's a funny old night tonight. I'm having a funny old night, everybody. Going down memory lane, it can be quite emotional. So I'm glad you're here. I bet you're not. I don't know what this podcast is, but I like to think you're with me, even though I can't hear anything you're saying. Well done, the Brigadier. But yes, I just do the best I can. I just try to do the best I can. I know already that's going to be the thing I choose for this episode. Because it's weird. I've read a lot of the great literature. I know it speaks to so many things at so many levels. I've seen many of the great movies. I've struggled to get through some of them. And many have left because this is what speaks to me. This is where I get my philosophy. This is where I get my emotion. This is what stirs my nostalgia. I'd love it if I was able to sit and quote Eisenstein movies or, Hardy and Dickens, which, I can sort of vaguely nudge my way through. But no, for whatever reason, and I'm not a simpleton, but for whatever reason, this is what speaks to me. This is what floats my boat. This is what, I hate the phrase, takes me to my happy place because it's just horrible. For whatever reason, it's this show that I will sometimes wax lyrical about, but its main job, and it is at its best, is when it is purely entertaining. If it's got subtext, that's great. If it's trying to make a point, that's great. But if it needs to be exciting and funny, that's what it needs to be. And if it's not those things, it's not Doctor Who. If it's not those things, it's bad Doctor Who. All the other stuff is gravy, great, but because it's so entrenched in our childhoods, this one in my teenagehood, and as I say, it's unlocked a memory I had forgotten was there, and it actually keeps in touch with our emotions. I don't drink anymore, and I think one of the reasons drinkers drink is to perhaps get in touch with emotions, access emotions that you struggle to actually access. And when you access those emotions through drink, you articulate things you may be denying yourself or keeping inside. Because this is so tied up in my life, it's peculiar. This is what does that now, because I can't get drink and sit maudlin on the sofa and wax lyrical. So instead, I watch something that I watched as a child, that I was furious with as a child. There's so many things I didn't like about Doctor Who because I was worried that it would be taken away from me. Although I spent so much time being furious about it, I think I forgot to enjoy it. There's a lesson there too, which as a 46-year-old man, you realise that you should try and enjoy as much of life as you can, because it starts to fly by, especially in this quarantine where I'm currently talking in October, and last time I looked it was March. That's great. I mean, it's a bit silly, but it's very Doctor Who. It's very Doctor Who, and Sylvester's great at those sorts of moments. And this is a terrific scene coming up, and unusual. We don't. I talked before about the Brigadier and unit being useful for killing the bad guys that the Doctor isn't prepared to kill. Well, here's one of those rare moments where the villainess and her sidekick, in this case her son, aren't killed. It does leave the question of what the hell do you do with a witch. I mean, what is she and Wormwood Scrubs? And you know, Andrew Cartmell's thing about bringing down the government is the script editor wanting to the show to tackle the issues of the day, I think is laudable, and I don't think it's too heavy-handed. There are occasional bits that are quite naive sometimes. I think in the odd bit of dialogue here and there. Not in this story. But that's being very picky. I think the idea behind it and the way it is generally deployed is great and remote. And as a however old I was, 15-year-old, the idea that Doctor Who was taking on the ideas of nuclear disarmament and talking about those things, it made me feel inspired. It made me feel that something was on my side. My show was talking to me. And of course, that there is the alternative reading of Doctor Who is that Doctor Who sees what is bad and he stamps it out. So it is multi-layered textually, but it's mostly about explosions and aliens. But I can't just keep saying I like that explosion and that alien, because this would get tedious fairly quickly if it hasn't already. And if it has, I'm very sorry. She does this really well. It's actually terribly moving. And again, the idea that, arch enemies can have a sort of connection is very real. But yeah, it's also typical, isn't it? Yeah, you two lovers, you get on well it's your troops and everybody who die for your honour and all of that sort of thing, whilst you all meet up at the UN summit and shake hands. Whatever the Doctor does here is never quite explained, but I don't really mind. It's like the Venusian karate aikido, but slightly more mystical. And anything to dilute those question marks with a bit of mystery. And I'm glad Anselin didn't die, and I'm assuming him and Bambera get to. Does he? I suppose he stays. Does he? He's gonna have to ditch the sword. That's a lawn to mow. We're at the Brigadier's house now. Have I got those clothes? I've got a shirt a bit like that. I'm sure I had more cravats, but I can't seem to find them. Didn't I say in episode 1? I wasn't sure I'd known who Angela Douglas was, but of course I knew who she was because of who she was in the Carry-Ons. I think I just hadn't put two and two together. Nice that she's not what I imagined when I imagined Doris. I imagined somebody a bit more earthy. I think I just judged by the name Doris. I hadn't associated with somebody quite so well-to-do. I thought perhaps the Brigadier had more earthy tastes. I do like his house though. So yeah, we've got a bit of a jolly Carry-On ending, and yes, the locking up of Morgaine and Mordred is a thing, and the incidental music goes full sitcom, doesn't it? I really enjoyed that. It was a story that I was not particularly fond of. I would say my least favourite of that season when it was broadcast. I can't see me liking any of the subsequent stories from this season any less when I do them for this project. So that stands the latter period of classic Who in good stead. Gosh, I didn't half bang on, and not necessarily about what was on screen there, but that's what Doctor Who does, I think. And I can only spend so many times going, that's an excellent set. I like his performance. So today it was opening up of unsuspected memories, and I thought that was great. isn't it interesting when the future of the show doesn't rely on what you're watching? You're much more forgiving of it. When something is an historical exhibit, you can enjoy it without any threat whatsoever. So I think that's a lesson to when one isn't enjoying Doctor Who. I see the fury. I see the fury of people for whom Doctor Who is not what they want it to be at the moment. And I think I always enjoy Doctor Who much more in retrospect because I still have that thing of worrying about what the general public will think. Or of what the BBC will think, or what the press will think, rather than just going, why don't I just enjoy it? Why don't I just enjoy the present for what it is. What's John? So now I've realised I've been doing this slightly wrong because they get to choose 2 things for the last episode, one for the last episode and one bonus. But for one of the recent ones I chose 2 things in the last episode. I don't think I should. I think I still get to choose one, but what my guest gets to do is they get to choose their one, and then they have a bonus one, which gives us a little more insight into what they like and their thoughts, but also it gives them a chance to wipe out one of the ones I've already chosen. So I'm only choosing one thing, and that is the Brigadier saying, I just try to do the best I can because I think that's a great philosophy. It really chimes with me at the moment as a self-employed person in a time of coronavirus, in the same boat as a lot of other people, and I see people are at each other's throats. People are uncertain what's happening. There's conflicting advice coming from the government. The arts sector is really struggling. All we can do is try to do the best that we can, and if in doubt, shoot the blue guy. So what's John chosen as his thing for episode 4?
4th choice is one that I think might divide the room, and it is the incidental music and just the sound design and editing in general on Battlefield, which I think is great. Obviously the score is by Kev McCulloch, and it comes in for a lot of flack. The main criticism levelled at it seems to be that it sounds very 80s, but I think that's why I love it. Like, I'm watching a show made in the 80s, I want it to sound like the 80s. But I think the score, like, sure, maybe elements of it detract from the action, but I think in general it really works. It can be quite playful at times when the script calls for it, and it can also be quite dark, so we get a lot of those sort of strange synthy string sounds, like we see in Silver Nemesis as well. Yeah, I love it, and the way that the score quite often bleeds into the sound effects. So, like with the sword and like when the destroyer comes along and stuff. I really like that. I think I could hum most of the score of Battlefield to you. I won't. Yeah, I think it's very ingrained in my head, possibly more so than the incidental music from any other Doctor Who story.
That's interesting. I like the and Kev McCulloch stuff does come in for a lot of stick. It's interesting, yes, that criticism. Oh, it sounds very 80s. Well, that's because it was made in the 80s. It's like when programs now have things in front of them going, this, just to warn viewers, this displays attitudes that were prevalent at the time. Well, yeah, that's because it was made then. This has failed to see what the social mores and accepted phraseology of the future would be. May as well say, this house is full of VHS tapes, which aren't playable these days. Now, I can confidently guess, though, that his favourite thing, number 5, is not going to be Xiao Yung. Poor old Xiao Yung. She's never going to be on anybody's favourite list. But what could it be? I've no idea. But I'm going to put good money on that, just because.
My final choice of a favourite thing. And like I said earlier, it has been hard because I love lots of things. And I feel bad missing some of them out. But I've chosen, I guess the location filming, location scouting in Battlefield, I think is top notch. I think I'm quite old school in that I think Doctor Who often works best when it is jaunting around the English countryside in a very Pertwee era fashion. And I think Battlefield does a great job of this. I guess it partly plays to my prejudices as well, as someone who grew up in the countryside. Just seeing that reflected in my favourite TV show. But yeah, Battlefield has loads of really nice looking locations. Like, it's very green, which obviously suits this sort of pastoral Arthurian story that's going on. But so like the Gorkrow Hotel, great building. That strange sort of ruined castle folly thing that Morgaine sets up shop in. That's great, excellent building. The Vortigern's Lake, like, get some lovely shots of that, and also lots of little drive down country lanes. I mean, accompanied by some terrible special effects, but you know, can't have everything. So yeah, that's my final choice, and I think we're done. Boom. I've been Jon Turner. You can find me online if you want to. This is jonturner.com. John without an H, in the Pertwee fashion. And this is Jon Turner on Instagram as well. Thanks everyone. Thanks Toby. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you enjoyed about Battlefield.
Oh, Jon is a lovely, lovely guy, and he's a very talented artist. And the reason I was looking around, for those of you on the video at that point, is because every time I've done an episode of Battlefield, I've had a piece of Jon's artwork by me, so that at the end I can show it to you. And I thought, well, I'll wait till episode 4. And of course, I've done episode 4. Where the hell have I put it? So hang on, because I can edit. This isn't the one I had out. This isn't the one I had out. This is another one I've gone to get, because the one I had out is somewhere. But it's I bought a bulk of these for Jon a doctor ago, because for those who are on the podcast who can't see this, it's a card, blank inside, handmade, of a print that Jon have done of the top of every doctor's head, or their silhouette of their head, their hair and hat, to make a question mark with Capaldi as the dot, and it's a lovely piece of artwork, and indicative of the sort of stuff that he does. He does non-Doctor Who stuff. He has stalls that he does, but he's also got, online, and he's a very skilled guy. He's also a very, very nice guy, and he's been very helpful to Excess Malarkey, the comedy club that I run every Tuesday, and is a valued member of the team. So please do check Jon out. Something I forgot to say is that, I don't know if you remember the TV show Soap Stars, where a load of actors, amateur and professional, went through a series of auditions. It was like Pop Stars, one of those shows, but it was to get a regular role in Emmerdale. And actually, this is never said, that Mark Jardine, who was the male, who won the role of the father in The Family and was a regular in Emmerdale, therefore, for, I think any of them only lasted 9 months. But anyway, he was the successful winner and has had a decent career since. I think it gave him a bit of a springboard. He is one of the unit soldiers. He's an extra in Battlefield, and that is never covered. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke. My special guest was Jon Turner. My thanks to this episode's featured patrons, who are Stephen Moffat, not that one, Sean McAllister, Darren Howard, Sarah Krotzer, Rob Dawson, Stephen White, Matthew Hooliston, Sebastian April, Mark Aldridge, Anthony Carroll, Gregory Hudson, Rich Wiggins, Kevin West, Hendrik Korzeniowski, and Duncan Harvey. The music for the podcast is by Dave Gates, and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Please rate and review this podcast wherever you get it from, and a 5-star rating always helps as well. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can support me at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke or at kofi.com/Toby Hadoke. But whatever, thanks so much for downloading and listening to this, and I hope you enjoyed it and come back for more. In the meantime, I hope all your places are very, very happy.